Hey my fellow druids, today I bring you a video where to get 2 shoes, and bring you 2 of meta builds so you can enjoy them in the highest difficulty, which is Torment 4. And these are 2 very popular builds in the community that you will definitely enjoy this new Diablo 4 season. In this video we will take a detailed look at their starter version so you can be in Torment with no problems at all. But before we continue, I want to remind you that our Discord server is ready for anyone who wants to join and stay up to date with the latest changes, or simply talk about builds and find farming groups so you can enjoy the game whoever you want. I'd also really appreciate it if you leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. That way the channel keeps growing and we can reach more players around the world. Thank you. Okay, before we continue with the builds, I want to make something clear for anyone who doesn't know what an off-meta build is. An off-meta build is a setup of skills, gear, and stats that doesn't follow the main meta trend of the game. In other words, it's not the build most players consider optimal for maxing damage, survivability, or efficiency in the hardest content like the pit, nightmare dungeons, or general farming. Why do I want to make this clear before continuing? Because these builds are usually less efficient compared to meta builds like Boulder or Pulverize. The good thing is that these builds won't require much gear to play, and they are also 2 very beloved builds in the community. I'm talking about Landslide and Shred. Even though they are not in the current metas this season, they are still very viable for certain activities, and here I will tell you their main strengths so you can enjoy them anyway. Let's start with Landslide. As we know, it's a weaver build that uses earth skills. As you may know, earth skill plus being in weaver form means we are taking advantage of a specific type of damage, overpowered damage. That's why this build has synergizes in items, passive aspects, and paragon that boost this type of damage. Let's start with the starter version of this build so you can enjoy it from the beginning of Torment. With this setup you can see here in my guide, you will have everything you need to start your journey with Landslide. We begin with the stats we need to prioritize on our items, like with power, max life, attack speed, armor, and all resistances. These stats are focused on improving both our damage and defenses at the same time, so you can play safely and easily during the early Torment levels. We also have key aspects that increase our damage. The most important one is Aftershock, because every Landslide pillar we cast hits and second time, and also increases its damage by 50.5% per pillar hit. This is one of the mandatory aspects if you want to play a good Landslide build. Another aspect we can take advantage of this season without needing to use Grizzly Rage, although we will still use it, is Rabid Beast, which makes us deal 80% more poison damage while shape-shifted, Weaver or Werewolf. In this case, we will be in Weaver form, and our direct damage becomes poison damage. Landslide is direct damage, so it fits perfectly. But with this aspect, we can no longer spread rabies, so we don't poison enemies on its own. That's different from doing poison damage. Later in the Paragon section I will explain how we will actually poison enemies. The next and the last aspect I want to highlight is Rampaging Werbeast, which increases our damage by 120% when we land critical hits during Grizzly Rage. But the best part is that its effect now lasts 60 seconds, so even if our Grizzly Rage ends, we still keep the buff. This, combined with Rabid Beast, give us great sustain even outside of Grizzly Rage uptime. We have other aspects that complement this build damage, like Retaliation or Accelerating, both of which also increase damage. The rest of the aspects are focused on improving our defenses, which are extremely important this season because the defensive system has changed. Like I explained in a previous video on my channel, defense is now just as important as damage, otherwise you will be dying all the time. Some of these aspects we will use our Juggernaut, which increases our armor in exchange for increasing our evade cooldown. An aspect of Might, which gives us 20% damage reduction when we use our basic skills. And we also have the most important item of this build, the one that makes everything work, Basilisk Prayer. Without this helmet, your earth skills won't count as werewolf skills, and with this helmet, all the magic happens, allowing the build to function and letting us use Landslide with Grizzly Rage. I also leave some unique items you can add to your build if you find them earlier. Then we have the non-mythic version, and here I want to focus on one item, Temerity. Let me tell you about my experience with these bands in the PTR, which some of you may have seen when testing. Temerity gives us barrier every time we heal above our maximal life. This is spectacular for surviving longer, which is why we stack stats like life on hit to heal above max life often, giving us permanent barrier. Since Fortify was changed and we lose the damage reduction it provided, and its percentage are lower now. Temerity is a great way to play safely at higher difficulties. Of course, this could change, and we may adjust things as we test more. Finally, we have the last version of this build, which we obviously can't test yet, but it has everything necessary and contains what I will personally use and recommend. Let's look at the most important skills and when to use them. We have Landslide as our main damage skill. We will put 5 points into it and maximize its damage and use Primal Landslide to boost critical damage. Criticals are triggered when we consume Terremotes. For the defensive part of the tree, we have Earthen Bulwark, giving us a barrier that absorbs 45% of our max life. This is a very useful skill not only for dangerous moments, but also to cast before each fight to stay fortified and get all the benefits tied to fortify, like the ones Retaliation give us. Next is Cyclone Armor, which we obviously can't use while Grizzly Rage is active, but it still gives us 20% passive reduction to non-physical damage. Last, we have Debilitating Roar, which brings several benefits. It reduces enemy damage by 40%, it fortifies us, and gives us 25% more damage. Of course, we will put 5 points into Grizzly Rage, reducing its cooldown from 50 seconds to 35 seconds. And finally, our key passive Ursine Strange, which gives us more life, more damage, and more overpowered damage while in Werewolf form. The good thing about all Earth plus Werewolf builds is that their Paragon setup is the same for Boulder, Landslide, and Pulverize, so the swap between builds won't be complicated, and the board works for all of them. This is a big advantage. We start with Dominate to boost overpowered damage immediately, since for any good Earth plus Werewolf build, Overpower is one of our biggest sources of damage, so starting with this glyph is the best option. The second board is Earthen Devastation, which was buffed this season. It now gives a juicy 70% critical strike damage with no conditions. The glyph here is Earthen Sky, a mandatory glyph that boosts nature magic skills like Landslide. Third board is Survival Instinct, which increases damage and overpower damage while we are in Werewolf form, which is all the time. The glyph Keeper works for this build because our Landslide is now poison damage, and Keeper increases non-physical damage by 50%, so it's direct synergy. These are the starting boards for your Landslide build. Once you get more points, you can move on to the next ones. I also include a section explaining how to play this build. It's extremely simple. Let's see the pros and cons of this build. The pros: as a good Earth plus Werewolf build, it has much higher defenses compared to human form on Werewolf builds. Very good damage to clear all content, and fast enough to push beat 80. Easy to use and only requires one mandatory unique to function. We got the cons of this build. It's very slow, especially for open world farming or dungeons. For Helltides Orcs, it can work better, but mobility is limited. Using Sinister Chandeliers is mandatory to poison enemies, otherwise we'll lose poison application. In summary, we have a balance of meta build, good damage and good defense, but slow for open world gameplay. Either way, it's a build you can enjoy with no issues in the highest difficulty. Remember, my Modulix profile is in the comments and the description, so you can check all the builds I'm preparing for the new season. Let's continue with one of the most beloved builds in the community, and for good reason. We are talking about the Shred build. As we have seen in past seasons, Shred remains one of the fastest, if not the fastest, Druid builds for completing any activity. We will take advantage of our Grizzly Rage ultimate to empower our skills with the Direwolf aspect synergy. But careful, we also see why this build is weaker this season. Let's take a look at the starter version of Shred. Just like Landslide, it benefits from the following stats early on, and we should focus on them to complete Torment more easily. Willpower, max life, attack speed, armor on all resistances. All these stats can boost both damage and defenses, making your skills stronger. As in any build, we have key aspects that are mandatory for Shred to function correctly. The first one is Direwolf. Mandatory to combine Shred with Grizzly Rage, because instead of turning into a bear, you will turn into a Direwolf. You gain movement speed, a resource cost reduction, in this case a spirit, and kills heals you for 10% of your maximum life. We usually use this aspect on boots. Remember to have it equipped before triggering Grizzly Rage, otherwise you can use Shred. Another key aspect is a Stormclaw, which is incredibly strong because it gives Shred AoE damage. Our critical hits deal lightning damage to the target and enemies around it. This makes it one of the most important aspects for clearing big monster packs. Then we have aspects that increase damage like Rabid Beast and Rampaging Werebeast, the same ones we use in Landslide. These are also very important here and add a considerable amount of damage. These are the most relevant aspects, and of course you will find the rest in the guide. I also leave a list of great uniques you may use if you get lucky and find them early, especially Mad Wolf Glee. The non-mythic version changes a lot because we integrate waxing givers as the main addition to the build. It lets us crit most of the time, which is when this build shines the most, activating Loss of Carnage, Stormclaw, Rampaging Werewolf, and the key passive Lupin Ferocity, just to name a few benefits of constant crits. At this point, you can start adding Tempering and Masterworking to your items to push your gear and reach Torment 4 sooner. We also have a final mythical version showing the best graded affixes and mythical items. The skill tree is one of the simplest since we use very few skills while in Grisly Rage. We start with Maul to alternate between it and Shred, stacking the Quick Shift passive. We obviously add 5 points to Shred to maximize its damage. For defensive skills, we have Cyclone Armor with 5 points, giving us 26.8% non-physical damage reduction passively. All we have to do is put it on the bar. Next is Blood Howl, which helps a lot with attack speed early on and heals us for 20% of our max life. When we are at full of life, this becomes overhealing, which synergizes perfectly with Temerity. Electric Shock is an important node because it gives us more damage to enemies we immobilize with lightning damage. And this works because of Stormclaw. We add 5 points into Grisly Rage for all its benefits and finish with our key passive Lupin Ferocity, which boosts our Werewolf crits by 75% every third crit, with Waxing Givius that it's basically happening all the time. Okay, the paragon for this build is very simple for one reason. When we start with Shred, we must reach Loss of Carnage as fast as possible. So we start with Fawn and Claw since the build benefits from extra damage to nervy enemies. Immediately after that, we move to the second board and position it properly for a later expansion. We reach Loss of Carnage as soon as possible because it gives us a lot of damage when we crit, and those crits restore 2 spirit per hit, perfect to keep our resources always available. Below that, you will find the section explaining how to play the build. It's extremely simple. Okay, now the pros and cons of this build. And we have to be honest, Shred is much weaker this season compared to last one. Pros, one of the fastest farming builds in the game with Cataclysms, amazing movement speed and insane mobility, jumping between enemies and deleting them instantly. Can complete all the content in the highest difficulty, Torment 4 in this case, has a huge pool of aspects to use and they are all easy to obtain and easy to assemble. The cons is Werewolf builds are significantly weaker in defenses and damage compared to Werewolf builds like Boulder, Landslide and Pulverize. It dropped a lot of tires in the pit compared to previous seasons, probably around pit 90, and going higher is very hard. And why? Because we have no reliable way to pull mobs together. In Season 10 we had Cyclone Armor with Wild Transformation, and in Season 9 we had the Falling Stars that group enemies. Now it's hard to find a good option, maybe the Kree rune could be the best one. And Fortify was heavily nerfed for Druids, so getting good defense on a natural fragile Werewolf builds makes dying more common. In summary, Shred this season is much closer to tier B than tier S, and even though it's a complete build for farming, I did keep it strictly for that purpose, unless you have very good gear for Torment 4. It can vary out in lower Torment levels. Well, my Druids, this video was made for those looking for alternatives to play this season, and of course you can find both of meta builds in my Mobalytics profile. To summarize, I did pick Shred for farming and Landslide if you want something more complete or solid to play. Shred is faster but with less damage, Landslide is stronger but slower. In my previous video, I already told you which build I recommended starting with and which one is the most complete so you can farm your favorite builds later. But as always, feel free to choose whatever you enjoy playing. I hope you liked this video and I wish you the best season start. Remember to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Thank you so much for the support. We will see each other in the Sanctuary.